G'day, I'm Mark Fennell, and welcome to download this show here on a variety of platforms. We're on YouTube, we are on iView as well this week, and this is your guide to the week in technology, the internet and culture. If you've never seen it before, what we do is we get two very smart people, who I'll introduce in a second, and they walk us through the week in technology. This week, we talk about the Google I/O conference. What has the giant Skynet of the internet announced this week? Plus, we examine what could well be the dumbest app that's ever existed in the world. It's called Yo. You find out about that in a second. Plus, it's a cup that knows what you drink. It's called Vessyl, and it's all coming up. But first, let me introduce this week's panel. She is the head of social for the advertising agency DDB Group, Karalee Evans. Welcome back.
Thanks, Mark.
And he is the editor of Gizmodo Australia, a fantastic tech website. Luke Hopewell, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Now, here's a funny thing. You two both look a little bit tired. I'm wondering, I'm not saying you don't look pretty. You both look super pretty. But could this have something to do with the fact that Google had a very big, very nerdy event last night?
Yes.
It's called Google I/O, and basically everyone who's been watching the World Cup is basically like, you got up at 2 a.m, what's the big deal? It's
World Cup for nerds.
It's World Cup for geeks.
Right. So this is the big event where Google basically get all the Google acolytes together and they tell them all of the things that Google is doing for developers. It's a little bit like Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference we talked about in the show the last couple of weeks. So a number of things were announced, a number of them really very, very nerdy, but I'm just going to go with virtual reality headsets made out of cardboard.
Cardboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoa. Get excited about one of those. You're now a cardboard hole if you have one of those.
Which is a spin-off of Glasshole, which is... We've like entered the
Which they didn't talk about.
They didn't. Well, that's the thing. They did not talk about Google Glass at all. Are Google backing away from Google Glass now, Karalee?
Well, I mean, the whole front row of Glass or Google advocates were wearing their Google Glass, so that still shows something. But no one on stage wore them this year, and no one talked about it.
Google's strategy for Glass is really starting to show through because they're doing it really interestingly. They're making the rollout super exclusive and they're keeping the price super high. And they've got specially designed frames from, the likes of Diane von Furstenberg, for example, who's a big, super hot fashion designer. They're rolling it out like they would a luxury handbag, a designer piece of jewelry or clothing for some reason. What you find on I/O is that everyone was wearing an Android Wear smartwatch, which basically means this is the Glass is the wearable for rich people and smartwatches are the wearable for everybody else.
And cardboard and a cheap phone is the Google product for the third world.
Yes, very big focus for cheap smartphones for the developing world. Walk me through it. What exactly does it look like? What can it do that separates it?
It's actually really interesting simply because the phone is almost developed by Google and then handed off to OEMs in the countries like India and Indonesia, for example. What you find is that they're then able to take almost what's a cheap Nexus phone that's like dual SIM, 4.5 inches, really not a market-leading product, give it to telcos to actually put their own apps on it and then sell it for less than $100. That's really going the last mile to connecting the developing world to smartphones for people who may never have owned a smartphone in their lives.
Yeah, and these are markets that are BlackBerry heavy, and these are the last markets that are BlackBerry heavy. So it's really interesting. BlackBerry, as we know, have not been doing so well, and I think this is probably the death knell for BlackBerry in their only markets left.
The other element that does actually affect us here in the not developing world is the fact that they want to start pushing Android out to devices beyond just phones and tablets. Android for cars, Android for everything. It feels like, is it just me or are they playing a little bit of catch up to Apple here who have got iOS for cars now?
It's the big word that they're going for is cohesive experience. The head of Android and Chrome basically said, we want your Android to follow you everywhere and be contextually aware of actually what you're using it for. When you plug it into your car, it automatically casts, in the same way that Chromecast works, a cut-down version of Android to your screen. There's also a new Android TV coming. They're having a second crack at that. There's also a lot of home and health integration as well. It does sort of feel like they're playing catch-up at the moment. Basically, Google is really trying to combat the F word, which is fragmentation for Android.
That's not the F word. I'm sorry. In no universe is that the F word.
It's the friendly F word. It's more offensive to Android users than the real F word.
Karalee, let's talk about Android TV because it does look quite impressive. So how does it stack up to this increasing amount of competition it has from Apple TVs and there's the Roku device and things like that? What does it have that separates it?
Yeah, and I think also Samsung.
Yeah, of course,
Samsung is the big sort of no one's been talking about, but Samsung really have owned the TV, the smart TV, and a lot of the connected devices within the home outside of Apple and others. So it's interesting that Google are now going direct to TV again, which I think is either the second or third time that they've tried, given that Samsung is one of their biggest device partners. So I'm not sure, I'm not excited by it, but, you know, be interesting to see. But I think they're a little bit too late.
There is this amazing schism, though, between Google and Samsung where they're like frenemies now. Where they service each other and they are such a huge part of each other's business dealings. But at the same time, you've got Google going out making their own phones. You've got Samsung going out making their own operating environments. How do you kind of define the future of those two going forward?
Again, frenemies is a really great way to say it because
Why have I got to say frenemies on Radio National?
We've talked before about how Samsung's going to try and sort of rip the tablecloth from under its users while not knocking any of the crockery over by switching everyone from Android to Tizen within the next 5 years. Like you said, Tizen's their own in-house operating system, which looks a lot like Android, has its own app store, and it's slowly sort of folding everyone into it at the moment. Google announced a new design as well, and that's going to be really interesting to see how Samsung responds to that design, which, you know, if you look at the two, they're similar, but in a very important way, they're different in the way that they actually work and look with animations and things like that. If Samsung doesn't take something like the Note 4, for example, or the next Galaxy S phone and run with a version of that design language, you'll really know that the road has forked for these two companies.
Karalee, biggest takeaway from Google I/O 2014?
It was a Google event for Google products for Google employees.
Cult of Google.
Cult of Google.
Yeah, right, Luke.
Google wants to be everything to everyone, and I think it needs to go back to the old Eric Schmidt thing of put more wood behind fewer arrows, because then you'll be guaranteed that it has a strong target to hit.
Fair enough. You are listening to Download This Show, your guide to the week in technology, the internet and culture, and all manner of other nerdy things. And last week, Facebook launched an app called Slingshot. It didn't actually have any Facebook branding on it, but basically it's designed to be essentially a Snapchat killer. You can send and receive what they call ephemeral messages. They disappear, very Snapchat-esque, but it comes with one very interesting catch, which is that in order to see the message that somebody has sent you, you actually need to send a message out first. It kind of remains pixelated until you send one. Why, Karalee? What on earth is the point behind that?
Usage, engagement, impressions.
It's going to piss people off.
Yeah, look, I mean, Facebook pisses people off. It's their thing.
It's true.
I think it's actually quite clever. I mean, it's really annoying, and users will bitch about it, but then they'll get over it and they'll use it. I think it's quite smart because it forces people to use and forces people into the behaviour that the app's trying to create. So therefore, it's going to work.
But there's such an entrenched usership of Snapchat as it already is. Do you think that particular market can be migrated? I mean, they all have Facebook accounts, so I suppose there's some argument that they can be.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's operating quite separate to Facebook. Facebook's not even in the default setup. It's mobile phone number. You can then link Facebook after. But look, I think the market's big enough. I think there are a lot of Generation Z, millennials, these type of audiences that are looking for apps, looking for the new cool hottest thing to play with. So I think there will be an audience for it. I also don't think it's going to cost Facebook anything if they only get 1 million users. Let's
talk about why Facebook didn't include themselves as part of the branding for it. What's the logic there?
Facebook is embarking on this big thing of, quote unquote, unpacking Facebook, unpacking the blue box. Basically what that means is they've got a whole bunch of different experiences like messaging, photo sharing and things like that are all encapsulated within the one app. That usage metric is now falling, that all-important engagement metric that investors buy into. What you find with Slingshot is that they're actually saying, well, we don't actually want this to be associated with Facebook at all, because if people are leaving Facebook to go to a Snapchat style of app, we don't want them to know that they're actually using one of our products. It's why Facebook hasn't Facebookified Instagram, for example. They're really trying to buy up all of the properties that its users are rapidly leaving to. so that they can continue to say, look at our new products and look at how many people are using them today.
It's also that conglomeration style thing where, I think the best analogy I've heard for Facebook is they've become like Disney, where Disney obviously has the House of Mouse brand, but they also own the American TV network ABC. They also own ESPN, all these things that you wouldn't instantly recognize as the family of Disney, but they're all part of your media diet, whether you know it and like it. Does it make me an old man that my first thought with Slingshot was my battery, my data costs of constantly sending images back and forth? Does that make me an old man?
No, I had a very similar thought. And I also thought they really need to rename this Vertigo. Like, did you feel sick when you were using it with the animation? I was just like, no, I can't.
For people listening on the radio who haven't tried it, describe the vertigo-inducing animation.
So when iOS, was it iOS 7, and they had the animations, and so it's all about that immersive. What they're trying to create is that you're feeling that you're within the device and you're starting to fall down a fucking tunnel. I mean, it's quite animated. They move, they jump, they fall down into the screen, they jump out of the screen, they fly, and you're using it and you're sending slings or shots or whatever the noun is.
Dick pics.
Dick pics.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get any.
Well,
I'll add you.
It's all right. Just give me 1 second. It's fine. This is the least Radio National show on Radio National. I don't know if you picked up on that. Look, the interesting thing about Slingshot is it's part of a suite of ephemeral messaging apps. Obviously, we talked about Snapchat, but another one that kind of caught my eye this week, mainly because they were hacked, is Yo. Ugh. Now... The reason we bring this up is because Yo may well be the winner of our never-ending search, as I said at the top of the show, for possibly the most pointless app that's ever existed. Essentially, it's just a way of selecting 5 people and then just sending them Yo. The thing with this is, it started as an April Fool's joke, but it's now got 50,000 users who've sent 4 million Yos. Apple, this is my favourite thing about this. Apple originally, I understand, rejected them out of the App Store because it didn't have enough substance, and yet somehow it's still taken off. Why is there this rise of ephemeral? I mean, I understand why there's a rise of ephemeral apps in the context of dick pics, but Yo doesn't even give you that.
Look, I think single-purpose apps are really important. That's definitely where a lot of apps and consumer-led behaviours are going. We're seeing a lot of apps diverge and split to have that single purpose. Yo is a single-purpose app.
Literally a single purpose.
It's a single that is as literal as what single-purpose can be.
Single syllable.
But, I did originally... want to just say, the only thing I can say about Yo is no. But when I then look at it a little bit more non-emotionally, it's quite interesting in terms of 2 reasons why I think it's interesting. One, because it's not just sending Yo for the sake of Yo. They've actually positioned it around different experiences and moments. So I'm running late, you want to let your girlfriend know with a simple Yo, versus I'm thinking of you, Yo. But then
so much subtext, Karalee.
Do you know? Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty. It's like, well, what does that mean? But I think the most interesting thing about it, and they've said during the unfortunate little security breach that they don't capture data, that they're not capturing a lot of user data. They're capturing, I think, 15 different data points.
Which is amazing, given that the only thing that actually matters to the user is Yo. Wow. So which data points have they been pulling? Do they take location? Where?
If you have a look at the permissions for Android, basically it looks like you're authorizing your phone to be tapped by the NSA. Yeah. It takes everything from your name and address. It takes your Gmail account history. It takes your location, takes your phone number, and also grants permissions for the ability to control all of these things like the microphone when it doesn't even have a sound-based, functionality or equivalent. It is the worst thing ever published.
You know what? If you're playing the download this show drinking game where you have to drink every time we mention Facebook, Google, the NSA, you are hammered right now. Okay, so in terms of Yo, is this the sort of thing that actually has much of a lifespan? Because you get the sense that there is one of these new apps every 3-4 weeks, which you discover when you cover them every 3-4 weeks. Do they have much of a life beyond that?
No.
Okay. Yo,
well, let's hope not. No. Look, I think Yo lucked out. They hit the perfect PR storm, which propelled them to, becoming viral 50,000 viral.
Given no one was really trying to promote it, 50,000 isn't a
Yeah,
bad
and I mean,
innings.
they hadn't
Yeah.
even finished their back end when it went viral. So I think apps like this we will still see in the marketplace. We will still see Mashable and TechCrunch and others covering. We'll still talk about it. You know, they'll come and go, but that's the industry. That's the environment. Whether Yo sticks, no.
It's just so easy, that line.
I know. It's just like, yo,
That's the efficiency
no.
of communication
Do
you
know,
get from somebody that works in advertising.
I read an article that said how to use Yo for business, for brands.
Shut it down.
Really?
Said
What was
just-
the uptake?
They were saying about how brands can get involved around how you can use Yo in your messaging, how to become relevant to this audience, how brands can then get onto the platform. And I just thought, my God, like it's just moments like that where you think, yeah, just stop.
Stop. I love that you went to say no and then you stopped. It is interesting in this kind of moving away from Yo because it's ridiculous. In this broader space of ephemeral apps, they're talking everything from WhatsApp to Snapchat here. They are kind of changing now, where they're introducing more kind of live, up to the minute interactions where you have to where you can chat with people. At the moment, we've talked about this a couple of times in the show. Where do you think that category of apps, that ephemeral, instant, always connected marketplace, is going?
You know what? We rag on it and we hate apps like Yo and we criticize apps like Slingshot, for example, but they're not going away. Like you said, there's a new one every 3 or 4 weeks. And these things are being taken up. And despite the fact that 90% of the people who use Yo will delete it next week, is that 10% of people that still have it left, find a use case for it. There's a piece online on Forbes right now about a guy who uses Yo to communicate with his wife to let each other know that they're thinking of each other, or for a 2-year-old to just say, hey, I'm using the phone, isn't it fun? Everyone will find a different use case for all of these ephemeral apps. And what you find is that you, as developers, it's your job to create something with a single use, like, for example, destructible images or just sending one word to each other or one message. But it's also giving your users the ability to take that app and do anything with it. I don't want to sound like I'm defending Yo because it's awful, but having said that, people will always find a use for even the most mundane of apps.
You are listening to the voices of Luke Hopewell, who is the editor of Gizmodo Australia, and Karalee Evans, who is the head of social for the advertising agency DDB Group. My name is Mark Fidel, and why don't you just go outside, put the computer down and play with something real, is what irascible parents and every baby boomer I know has been saying for years. Well, now there is a new game designer who is trying to bring together the physical play and the digital play. And of course, the answer he's landed on is, drumroll please, robots.
Kids right now, I mean, 7 or 8 years old, they're playing with their iPads more than they're playing with physical toys. I personally definitely think that's a problem, and this allows the kids to still play with their iPads and have all the leaderboards and social aspects, and they can share the tricks with their friends and stuff like that, but they're also getting outside and building ramps for Ollie and building mazes for Sphero and things like that. So I think it's exciting. So I'm Ian Bernstein. I'm the CTO and co-founder at Robotics. Robotics is a company that's making this new category of connected toys for connected play. So basically, toys that exist in the real world, toys you can touch and play with, but also connect to your smartphone to connect to the virtual world. We bring those together and we're creating this new category, connected toys. Back in 2009, I was working part-time at a robotics company in Colorado, Road and Arrows Robotics, and doing development around humanoid robots and stuff like that. And one night I was sitting there playing on my iPhone, and I thought, well, man, I have this amazing computing device in my hand that has a display, 3G connectivity, all these sensors. This thing is far more advanced than these processors that we were putting inside of our robots. You know, why can't I use the smartphone as the brain? So that was the initial idea of controlling physical things in the real world from the smartphone. And nobody was doing that back in 2009. A few people were doing it over Wi-Fi, but I thought it was a cumbersome experience, and I wanted to use Bluetooth to make the experience really seamless. So with that idea, I met my co-founder, Adam Wilson, and we started prototyping things. We bought an Android phone. We put a remote starter in my car so we could like roll down the windows and start the car from the phone. We put our stuff in the toy tank and drove the toy tank around, opened the garage door, controlled lights, more of the more obvious things, right? The home automation. But we, 3 in the morning one night, a couple months later, we came up with the ball.
And you're also responsible for why the studio today is filled with an abundance of balls, bright little round balls. Now, describe for me what we actually have in studio here, because they're cute little glowing balls.
Yeah, so we have our first product called Sphero. And Sphero, it's about the size of a baseball. You tap it on the table to wake it up, and then it lights up and starts moving. And it connects to your smartphone, and via one of our apps, you can actually control it. You can drive it around. So this ball, when you put it on the ground, you can roll it in the direction you want it to move. You can change its color. And then we've developed about 30 different apps out now for playing different games and programming it and doing all kinds of fun stuff.
One of the defining features about sort of robotics devices is they do have this sort of whimsy about them. It's almost like they've got a bit of personality. Talk me through designing personality into one of these sorts of things.
So I think when people look at robots or any sort of character, we sort of intuitively as humans want it to be real. We almost create these fantasies around the personality inside the robot. So we try to reinforce that in cases where we can. When people look by it, walk by it and look at it, they're like, oh, it's a ball, and it's a very approachable shape. As soon as a kid sees this thing, if I drive it out on the street, the kid just runs towards it and picks it up. Some of it's just by accident, again, where you'll notice when you sort of tap it to wake it up, the internal mechanism is always trying to level itself and straighten itself out to a certain heading, say like north. So just that feeling as you pick it up and hold it in your hand and it's sort of subtly moving around, it
like
does
it's got
feel
a mind
alive.
of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And the notion of the light, where did that come from?
We figured the light would be a good sort of feedback mechanism. So if you're playing a multiplayer game, there could be the red team and the blue team, and we'd be able to change the color to whatever we wanted. So a bunch of our apps, the color actually is part of the gameplay.
What would you like to see change about the way robots are perceived?
One of the common perceptions now is just robots are just these industrial arms welding our cars together and, funky looking things vacuuming our floors. But, I'd say, I want people to think about that robots can be fun and approachable and not scary in any way, I guess.
Ian Bernstein there, the creator of the Sphero, the Ollie, and of course, the man behind Robotics. You are listening to Download This Show. Welcome back to our panel. Karalee Evans from DDB Group and Luke Hopewell, the editor of Gizmodo Australia. I'm fascinated. In the world of toys, what toy did you play with you think is most in need of a 21st century reinvention a la Sphero?
I played with Lego, with Meccano. I played with trucks and Matchbox cars. I wasn't a Barbie girl, but I wouldn't turn them into robotics. I think the beauty of those toys is that they're not talking back at you. Maybe Furby could be kind of cool. It's like taking it to the next level. But I wouldn't change any.
Purist.
Yeah.
Stick with it. Yeah.
Well, for those things, I do have a suggestion, but.
The toy that I played with while I was a youngster has really kept up with the digital world, and it's Lego. If you have a look at Lego, they've invested in really intelligently in franchises that capture the imagination of kids, but they're also moving to reinvigorate the Lego Mindstorms community, which is, if you've never seen Mindstorms before, basically you can get yourself a unit, a little robotics unit, and teach yourself how to code and build a robot. And every year, Lego still holds Mindstorms tournament where people are encouraged to build a full soccer team out of robots. And it's really great along that initiative of teaching kids to code, and they were doing it as early as the mid-90s. The only other toy that I'd say would need an update from my childhood is connector pens.
Oh, that's going back in time, isn't it?
You know what's interesting? The Chinese hands-free sperm extractor robot.
Sorry, what?
Pardon?
Have you seen that?
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm happy to admit it on any platform.
This is the thing that got me interested in robotics. Is 2012, and now they've just released a second updated version, and it's built by the Chinese, who are very smart. And it's a hands-free sperm extractor robot.
Hands?
Hands-free.
Hands-free, right.
Does it plug into the PowerPoint? Because I'm not putting anything that close to my
Is
junk.
it battery operated?
It's electric. Imagine R2-D2.
Yes. Are you about to ruin somebody's childhood here?
Mine.
All of us.
Maybe. Well, I think they've used that as a visual reference.
Of course.
Then it's got a black hole, like a black thing, but hip height.
Yep.
So for normal heighted people, not people like me standing on a block. And then I think the objective of this robot, because, you know, with the law around robots shouldn't harm humans, you don't use your hands, so you come up and introduce yourself to
It's very hygienic.
this robot. Yep. Hands are,
Hands-free.
you could like be
Yeah.
drinking, reading a magazine, which is probably going to be helpful
definitely
given what
very
it's
helpful.
trying to do. And it extracts your sperm.
I don't feel well.
I think this might be the only time in my life I've ever actually been speechless. This is a first. I'm fast. Yep. I'm gonna just. You are listening and watching, download this show here on RN and a variety of other wondrous ABC platforms. The person delivering the gold right now is Karalee Evans, who's the head of social at the advertising agency DDB. You can address your complaints too. No, kidding. And standing next to her, utterly dumbfounded, is Luke Hopewell, the editor of the tech website Gizmodo Australia. And I just gonna feel the need to roll on from that one. And finally here on the show, imagine if your cutlery knew what you were eating. Well, it turns out that might actually be a thing. It's called Vessyl. It's spelt with a Y for literally no good reason. And it's a cup that reads what you're drinking. Right. So Karalee Evans, what it says it does is you pour something into it, and then it uses kind of sensing technology to work out on a molecular level exactly what's inside the liquids that you're drinking, the water content, the sugar content. But they don't really go into an enormous amount of detail about exactly what the science behind that is. Does that kind of operate as a red flag to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the problem. I think it's really hard to find any in-depth detail about what's behind this product, what's in it, how is it doing what it's saying it's doing.
How reliable is it?
How reliable it is. And that is definitely a red flag. I can understand it because it's a new product, obviously new technology. They don't want to give their cards away. But also I think consumers are savvy enough nowadays that if they don't understand something, and if something looks so sci-fi that they think, how can that possibly work? It must be bollocks. Then I think they need to do themselves a favour and explain in more detail what is making this thing work the way it does.
They have been pretty upfront about some of the technologies that are around the cup. You know, you've got a battery in the bottom that charges wirelessly. You've got like 7 days worth of power out of it. There's also a little motion sensor that when you hold it away from yourself, it activates the screen, gives you the nutritional readout of what you're drinking, for example. But yeah, like you said, the only real science behind it is it says we use quote unquote molecular sensors within the cup.
And they've coined was it Prime?
Yes.
With a Y.
With a
again.
Y.
With the Y.
Because the English language is...
You and I have spoken about the
my
lack
Lord.
of vowels in this industry. But I think that, again, just throws up for me. I'm quite cynical consumer. What's Prime? What's Vessyl? Is it actually, if I take it to a pub
You've made up words. Now do I trust you to make up science?
Yeah, exactly. But if I take this to the pub and put all my drinks in there and someone spikes my drink, is it actually going to know that drink spiked and then going to tell me?
I've never
Really
thought about
fascinating.
that. That's a very good point. All right, now let's operate off the assumption that the science does hold, which I'm just going to park that conversation and we might get in contact with them and see if we can find out some more details about that. Assuming that it does work the way it's advertised, do you think people are actually going to be organised and hygienic enough to wash out the cup in between every drink? Because, I mean, I see people with the most awful-looking keep cups every day, just going, oh, just refill it with more coffee, it's fine, it cleans it out. No, it doesn't. So do you think people are actually going to be organised enough to use it in the fashion in which it has been designed?
I think if you've spent a couple of $100 on a smart cup, you're actually going to want to be able to keep your quote-unquote molecular sensors clean.
It feels like a euphemism. Keep your molecular sensors clean. And I just don't feel like this show's been smutty enough, is all I'm saying. Okay, so walk me through where do you think it can go wrong? Again, operating off the assumption that we believe the science to be factual and not fantasy.
Anything that you expose to liquid in technology is a problem. People have found it when they're trying to waterproof smartphones. People have found it when they're trying to waterproof wearables. If you get something wet, it's going to break eventually. Same with very small built-in sensors. You know, you look at the fingerprint sensor in the iPhone 5S, there are assumptions that it's going to fail in a year because of what it's made of. Same with this quote-unquote molecular sensor. You're going to be getting it wet and covered in stuff, like whether it's beer or water or coffee, every single time you have a drink. So the accuracy of that sensor over time is going to be something that's really cagey and people are going to really wonder about. And it's one of those unfortunate things that only time will tell.
I just realised if you combined Vessyl with Karalee's sperm collector.
So we were talking about that this morning.
Of course we were.
You could do that for medical purposes and measure sperm count.
Oh, medical purposes.
Definitely medical, for science.
Absolutely.
The other element here is, would you use it in public? Because it's it's a very odd thing to do. And of course, the holy grail of every app developer, gadget designer is to change public behaviour, change the way that they work. But the act of going into a pub, ordering a beer, and then pouring it into this thing in front of the bartender who looks at you just being like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, for women who are worried about drink spiking and stuff, I can see that this could be something that you would use in public. I have a real problem with this gadget. Quantified self is a movement, an important movement around capturing your data in a passive way. So it's around using things like Jawbone, using your phone when you're ready to access that data, but it just seamlessly tracks the information that you need in the background. So your behaviours and your normal day-to-day really aren't changed that much. It's just a value add to allow you to empower you to then understand how you're tracking along. This gadget forces behaviour into a very structured and quite defined space. You have to use this cup for it. And yes, I acknowledge that it has the app where you can input your drinks and things. I just have this problem where it's moving into a space where the gadget is now trying to force a behaviour and change things. And for me, that just doesn't sit well, because I think the role of technology and the role of data in empowering people around to live healthier and better lives is still in that passive, seamless background versus being in the foreground.
I'm the exact target market for these sorts of things, because I wear 3 different fitness trackers in the different phones and wearables that I carry around. And as I find that I'm really fickle, because as long as it looks good and serves me a purpose in terms of tracking data and tracking my life, I'll probably use it. So I'm probably the target market for something like this. And I'm not one of these people who is concerned that if they gather this data and see that I'm drinking a lot of Coke, that they'll push a lot of Pepsi ads at me, for example, because I know that the level of which I can be marketed to, which is quite high. I'm not about to switch to another drink because a smart cup told me to.
I have to say, the first thing that struck me, apart from possibly pixie science, was there's an enormous possibility for branding and marketing in here. If people start to know about what your common drinking habits are, they can really start to leverage that information. What do you think is the most useful thing you could do if you had the information that Vessyl collected?
Look, I think probably 2 ways. One, if you're a drink brand, you would want to get onto this gadget pretty quickly and really align your drink with it, whether it was an alcoholic enjoyable drink or whether it was a health type drink. But I think also just from a general it's been talked about for a long time now, but the holy grail is understanding down to a user base about what they like, what their behaviours are, what do they drink, what do they eat, where do they go, what times do they go. Any point of data that can give you or paint you that picture is a really useful source of information, and also will be used for advertising. I think this one you won't see advertising around it in the near. I think it's still that point where it's just too new, it's too unqualified around what it is, the technology behind it. But it's interesting.
Would you use Vessyl or Yo or any of the apps we talked about on the show today? Let us know on Twitter. The hashtag is download this show. It's very simple. It's very, very prescriptive. Huge thank you to this week's panel. Karalee Evans, the head of social for the advertising agency DDB Group. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
And Luke Hopewell, the still slightly emotionally scarred from today's chat, the editor of Gizmodo Australia. Thanks for coming back.
And a very good yo to you.
Get out.
Sorry.
Get out. And of course, thank you for watching another episode of Download This Show. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, by all means, leave a comment down in the section. We love to hear the sort of stuff that you like to say about the show. It actually forms future episodes. If you're watching this on iView, we actually do this as a radio show. It goes out at 9 p.m. on Sunday nights and 1:30 on Saturday nights. So tune in for that on Radio National. And thank you, as always, for watching Download This Show.